Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you so much for being here at the 2024 CFA Equity Conference, Waves of Resistance, Merging Waters and Pathways to Justice and Healing. We're going to get started in just a few minutes with our fantastic panel of librarians discussing book banning resistance. I'm thrilled to be here and honored to be your moderator for this session. My name is Catherine Paolillo, and I am the Outreach and Engagement Librarian at CSU Channel Islands. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman in her early 40s with curly brown hair, always in a messy top knot. Today, I am wearing glasses, a big set of headphones, and a standard issue librarian cardigan over a LeVar Burton Says Read Banned Books campaign t-shirt that seemed appropriate for today. I'm so grateful to Melissa Cardenas Dow for inviting me to moderate today and for all of the expert help from our conference organizers, the folks doing tech for me in this very moment, and our lovely interpreters. Before we get started, I do want to offer a land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we gather as the California Faculty Association on the traditional land of the California Indian people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit as well. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. It is important to understand the long history that has brought us to reside on the land of the California Indian people and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. The California Indian people are very much a part of today's California, living and working and caring for the land as they have always done. Acknowledging the land is an important Indigenous protocol, and we are honoring here today. I'm joining you today from the CSU Channel Islands campus, which occupies unceded Chumash land in Ventura County. To find the native lands on which you reside, I invite you to visit native-land.ca. The link to that and the full land acknowledgement will be in the chat. So some of you may have attended both days of the busy conference so far, or maybe you're joining us at the end of a very long work day or work week. So I just want to take a few moments for us to come together and focus our intentions in good energy to give our full attention to our panelists and the topic at hand. In order to do that, I invite you to join me in a community breath, to let go of all of our outside concerns and be present in this moment. So if you're able to, I invite you to relax, maybe adjust yourself in your chair, sit up straight if you've been slouching in your chair all day like I have been. You're welcome to close your eyes if you'd like, you don't have to. I'm going to ask you to inhale through your nose for a 4 count and then exhale through your mouth for a count of 4, breathing deep through the diaphragm. We'll repeat that a couple of times. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, exhale, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, exhale, 2, 3, 4. On this last one, if you'd like to, stretch your arms high above you, reach for the ceiling. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale and drop your arms, 2, 3, 4. Thank you so much for joining me in that. Now that we are centered and present and ready to listen to our panelists today, I want to bring your attention to our interruption practice. As part of our continuing commitment to racial justice work, when we experience examples of racial narratives, racism, or whiteness in our meetings, or as we conduct our business, we will address it. This means we can interrupt the meeting and draw the issue to one another's attention. We will do this kindly, with care, and in good faith. And further, we engage interruptions. We will take an intersectional approach, reflecting the fact that white supremacy and racism operate in tandem with interlocking systems of oppression and colonialism, racial capitalism, class, cis heteropatriarchy, and ableism. This statement is a reminder that we commit to do this in the service of ending the system of racial oppression. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laura for some logistics notes before we get into the panel discussion.
Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for joining CFA's Equity Conference 2024. A few bits of helpful information for today. Please update your Zoom name to reflect your full name, pronouns, and campus. Closed captioning and American Sign Language services are being provided. To turn on closed captioning, you may activate closed captioning by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. Then click Show Subtitle to view captions. The ASL interpreters will be spotlighted throughout the webinar. The chat and raise hand features will be disabled, but the Q&A feature will be enabled. Please note that this session will be recorded and posted at a later date to our CFA YouTube page and Council for Racial and Social Justice webpage. The audience interaction portion of equity sessions will not be recorded. Check out our Equity Conference landing page. All this information will be posted in the chat, and for more helpful bits of information, click on the link that's being posted into the chat. Thank you. Back to you, Catherine.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm going to try to keep my introduction really short so we can devote most of our time today to our panelist presentations and hopefully a fruitful discussion from the audience in the Q&A at the end. As I said, I'm Catherine Paolillo, the Outreach and Engagement Librarian here at CSU Channel Islands. Joining me today are Dr. Ray Pun, academic and research librarian at the Alder Graduate School of Education, Amanda Grombly, collection development and management librarian at CSU Bakersfield, Lisa Cheby, education librarian at CSU Northridge, and Ginny Barnes, our first-year student success librarian at CSU Fresno. We're here to share with you information about the recent uptick in book bans across the country, focusing on how these book bans, particularly in California, impact education and learning, and how we might work collaboratively with public libraries, librarians, educators, individual faculty, and bodies like the CFA to protect the freedom to inquire, learn, and express. The amount of book challenges and bans has increased at a crazy, alarming rate over the last few years. According to the ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom, who has kept track of the book challenges for more than 40 years, censors targeted 1,858 unique titles in 2021, 2,571 unique titles in 2022, and 4,240 unique titles in 2023. Of those titles, the vast majority were written by or about members of the LGBTQIA+ community, or by and about Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. And a book challenge doesn't necessarily mean that a book is automatically removed or censored, but it can result in access being restricted or revoked at a public or school library, or educators and librarians might feel pressure to self-censor for a variety of reasons. Most of the current book bans are in Texas and Florida, but California is not immune to these attacks. So I'm grateful for opportunities like we have today, where we can shed light on these issues and work together to find ways to fight against censorship and promote intellectual freedom. Our panelists were brought together today because of their unique experience and knowledge related to intellectual freedom, book bans, challenges, censorship, in so many different areas, the work of ALA, academic school and public librarians, teachers and educators, various censorship laws, and so much more. While we listen to our panelists, I want to remind you of our community breath to stay present, take in the information they're presenting to us, and add your thoughtful questions to the Q&A so we can discuss them later. I'm going to let our panelists tell you more about themselves and their individual expertise, starting it off with Dr. Ray Pun.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. So I'm going to share my screen. I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to give a special shout out to Melissa Cardenas-Dow for bringing us all here. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Ray Pun, pronouns are he and him, and I am wearing black glasses, a blue shirt, and a black blazer in a background that says California Faculty Association, Women's History Month. And so you can reach me here if you have any questions. My email address. I work as a librarian at a teacher's education program where we serve excellent teachers, graduate students becoming teachers, and it's all throughout the state of California. So I'm going to bring some perspective into that. First, I wanted to share that we're seeing a lot of attacks happening now in higher education. In this list from the University of Michigan Under Siege, Teaching Bans, Academic Freedom, and the Future of Higher Education National Center from the Institutional Diversity webinar last week, Dr. Lorena Chambers, a postdoctoral research fellow in the Inclusive History Project and the Department of History at the University of Michigan, highlighted these types of state policy affecting higher education. From erasure of DEI offices, policies and positions, to banning teaching divisive concepts, to banning trainings and teachings related to LGBTQ+ policies, to K-12 laws affecting college prep, such as book bans and critical race theory. These are all concerted efforts to silence and raise fear. These attacks are also red herrings, attacks that create anxiety and suppress people's abilities to share their thoughts and expressions. And so it feels like from PEN America statistics for 2022-2023, there's increasing alarming banned books, as Catherine shared earlier. There should be some updated ones that I'm going to mention shortly after, but it's not surprising what we're seeing. Banned books happening about gender expression and identities, as well as topics about race. Some of these titles have always been on this list, like The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison, but it's been increasing over time in public and academic libraries and schools. And now we're seeing bomb threats, harassments, intimidations all over the country, and it's really scary times. This new report just came out today from the American Library Association. The number of titles targeted for censorship surged 65% in 2023 compared to 2022, reaching the highest level ever documented by ALA. The new numbers released today show efforts to censor over 4,000 unique book titles in schools and libraries. This tops the previous high from 2022, when 2,571 unique titles were targeted for censorship. Well, that's too many. Let's give up. It's a lot of issues, right? We should give up. We should stop this webinar. Actually, this is not the assumption or the answer we should be thinking about. There are resources to share, and that's what we're going to cover today. So as I mentioned, the American Library Association is the world's largest and oldest library association in the world, with over 45,000 members from around the world, especially in the United States, a 501c3 that has created an advocacy engagement plan where you can reach elected officials to take action. Issues on book banning to federal funds for libraries, and keep in mind, censorship issues are happening at the local level and not necessarily at the federal level that we're thinking. So this requires grassroots and local community engagement and awareness. There are also state chapters connected to ALA, and they are important partners in driving this issue in their communities. So what are these resources? This campaign, called Unite Against Book Bans from the American Library Association, is a coalition made up of different partners from around the country. And this is a great resource to explore with talking points, strategies with legislators, social media templates to raise awareness that everyone has the right to read. It's all free for anyone to use and to share and personalize in local contexts. In addition, ALA released Unite Against Book Bans released a book resume database recently to highlight books that have been challenged and to promote the accolades that follow with these books, like a resume. There's also the Freedom to Read Foundation, which is part of ALA to help track legislative issues regarding censorship issues across the country and supports library workers experiencing these issues in different ways. from providing funds called the Merit Fund to free learning webinars. I work with teachers and often share these book resumes, database with them, strategies to explore, and to highlight this matter. As I mentioned earlier, there are also state chapters. In California, we have the California Library Association, and it has its own advocacy page filled with resources, tools, interviews, webinars, and trainings. You do not have to be a librarian nor a CLA member to participate or learn more. There are ways to engage with representatives, to veterans, to fundraising. These are all free, and you can learn more by visiting cla-net.org. Book censorship issues have happened in California too, such as areas of Orange County, San Jose, and Central Valley. So it's important to see what libraries are doing to promote their values and services to the community. So let's look at what libraries are doing around the country. Wood Library in New York set up a Write a Letter to the Editor page on their website to engage with their community members, to share good news and uplift their stories. We can always do this as private citizens too. What are library advocates doing? Some folks have testified in the past. It's intense work. If you find ways to prepare to speak to a state or federal committee as an expert witness or as a community member, be prepared and concise. I learned you must always practice, practice, practice. If speaking is not your thing, try writing. The Op-Ed Project is a great resource where they offer op-ed writing training. I took one last year and got good feedback. It's an intensive program for 2.5 day virtual session. Your school may consider sponsoring this kind of training. It's a great way to get the message out by writing a letter to the editor, an opinion piece in your local newspaper about these censorship issues. The American Library Association also released an advocacy plan, which is an open access workbook. It helps you think about your community, to set goals, and to engage with library advocates on these topics. It's a great resource if you are not sure where to start to engage with your community, and this is open to everyone to use. Let's talk about strategy. Strategy is key here. When we think about strategy, we think of power mapping, which can be a powerful way to think about who in your community, the stakeholders, the decision makers, have influence and have power in making such decisions. How do you identify them? How do you network with them? How do you think about the change? You may want to consider a listening tour to hear from what others are saying from these issues and to get others involved. It's all about relationship building and influence. And I encourage everyone to do this either in your institutions or within certain groups and really think about these issues in the context of your community. What else to read? So if you're still looking for more resources, consider looking at the following resources here that I listed, such as Censorship by Kelly Jensen from Book Riots. It is a really important issue that keeps happening on a daily basis, and Kelly has done a lot of great work writing on this. There's the School Library Journal, also another prominent sub-serials that you can read more about this issue happening in schools, and consider following the ALA Public Policy and Advocacy News on social media or their one-click policy where you'll get updates via email. And every Library Institute resources is a really great one to consider. Every Library Institute, they offer training and resources to anyone interested in advocacy work for libraries, including an open access publication called The Political Librarian, focusing on legislative matters in the field. I encourage you to check it out. And I know that was a lot of information, so I'm going to share shortly the URL so that you can access the slide deck and access all the resources I just shared. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ray. I really appreciate that. I love action items, and a to-do list is my favorite. So with that, I want to turn it over to our next speaker, Amanda. Amanda, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me. So my name is Amanda Grombly. I'm a middle-aged white woman of size with brown and gray hair. Today I'm wearing pink glasses and a black and white pinstriped blouse. I'm here to talk to you today about public libraries and book bans, what we can do in the Academy to better support our communities on the war against intellectual freedom and the freedom to read. The idea that public libraries and public education exist to create a more informed citizenry is great in theory, but it doesn't accurately convey the breadth of services and labor involved in informing and educating and providing access to our communities through public library work. Libraries are more than book repositories. They are sanctuaries and community centers. They provide access to entertainment, but more importantly, they serve as a portal to social services, workforce development, and supplementary instruction for children and adult learners. They are incubators for building relationships, cultivating ideas, and establishing partnerships with parties from different sections of our community. These goals are often challenged strategically through structural and budgetary means to censor and suppress programming, support services, and materials. Local governments, local library advisory boards, and community groups have influence over policy and budget allocations for public libraries. These bodies can limit which groups have access to library facilities and spaces, how individuals and groups qualify for library access to services and resources, and which programs are funded or permitted to operate within or in conjunction with the library. For example, when I worked with Tulare County Library, there was a discussion about how to provide library services to children whose parents were undocumented migrant workers in the community. And I live and work in the central San Joaquin Valley. I have all my life, and this is a very political issue in our region. We can't, the decision was made at that library to allow children to sign up for library cards without parental consent because their parents and family members were not comfortable engaging with a government body. And so in order to provide service to the children and students in the area, we made that policy decision. Those types of policy decisions have far-reaching implications with providing service and representation and senses of belonging in our communities. Another example of how community interference and government agencies and policy or budget can impact programming and resources in libraries is the recent, within several years, suppression of drag story times in public libraries. Parents, community members, and government bodies not only engaged in establishing or enforcing policy in such a way to prohibit this programming, community groups and individual citizens engaged in protests and threatening behavior to intimidate library workers and participants to prevent these story times from taking place. In protests, some libraries held them anyway. At CSUB, our teacher education department reached out to partner in trying to host an event on our campus because our county libraries are not an environment where such an event could take place, but we weren't able to bring that to fruition. Instead, our education librarian and our teacher ed department chair were able to create a series of story times online for children featuring authors and stories about people of color and the LGBTQIA+ community. Book bans by the issues. When it comes to library content, banned and challenged books used to be classified into very basic categories based on sexually explicit content, violence, and a little bit based on race and ethnicity and LGBTQIA+ themes and community representation. That has changed in the last 15 to 20 years. 25 to 30 years ago, banned books were centered on authors like Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, and Sherman Alexie, mostly along lines of race and content related to, like I said, sex and violence. In the last 15 years or so, 15 to 20 years, the challenges have migrated and are targeted more on contemporary and children's work. And the issues have changed to be very much more targeted and explicitly against or in violation of authors and characters who identify as people of color or part of the LGBTQIA+ community. When I worked as a public librarian, one of the first interactions I had with censorship and challenging of materials was an older white woman who approached me at the reference desk and asked where we kept the books with inappropriate material. I had to explain to her that that's a subjective judgment and that there is a book in every library to offend anyone. And that quote is worded differently, but it's a standard motto for librarians. In every library, there should be a book that offends somebody. We provide access to everyone, to all kinds of information, and people are left to make determinations on their own. As part of that interaction, I challenged her conception of inappropriate materials, and I pointed her in the public library, it's the 800 section, to the literature section. And I said, you're free to browse any of the canonical literature at your leisure to challenge the materials you don't think belong here. She turned around and walked away, which for me was a win. Not all interactions like that end that way. But the primary focus of these challenges are on gender identity, sexuality, and self-concept. They're primarily targeted against people of color and the LGBTQIA+ community. When this new wave of challenges began, it started off with a children's picture book called And Tango Makes Three, which to my understanding is a real story based on two male penguins that live in a zoo who were given the opportunity by their zookeeper to raise a family. And they were a bonded pair. This book was challenged a lot in the K-6 community, but also in public libraries. In 2022, as you'll see on the screen, and Ray was able to provide a newer graphic for this, the most frequently challenged book in the United States in 2022 in 17 of 50 states was the graphic novel Genderqueer, which is a memoir of the author's journey of self-discovery as a member of the LGBTQIA community. And the book was banned because it was classified as sexually explicit. And so the explicit reasons that are given for challenging these books fit in the older categories, but implicitly they are targeted based on the identity of the authors and the characters in the content. As a public librarian, I shared an office with the young adult librarian at our library system, and she had a teen group that was very diverse across gender identity, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. These students demonstrated for me in a very concrete and clear way how much our students and community members need to feel a sense of belonging. They need to see themselves represented in the media they consume, and they need to feel represented and a sense of belonging in the community in which they live. They need spaces of their own and access to materials where they're represented and where their ideas are reflected and respected. Book bans and challenges are no longer coming just from individuals and small groups of parents. They're coming from much larger organized groups like Moms for Liberty, who has now become, that group's become so organized and so large that it's now considered an anti-government group. They have organized to circulate lists of materials they feel are unfit for school and public libraries. And it's not just members of Moms for Liberty who have children in a school district or who live in a public library service area. They are organizing and reaching out beyond their communities to censor materials. In addition to that, and it was most notably recognized this year in Temecula, they are infiltrating government positions and library boards and school boards to continue their agenda and suppress funding and materials this way. So what's the call to action? What we can do is engage our students and our colleagues in discourse about the issues. We can encourage outside reading and familiarity with these materials, even when we're not explicitly teaching that content in our courses. We can encourage civic engagement. We talk about high impact practices and service learning a lot as part of GI 2025. And we have opportunities to engage students on these issues in spaces that they aren't typically used to engaging with them in. And so having them visit a library, having them participate in a Board of Supervisors meeting, a library advisory board meeting, and see how things are decided, but also seeing who's in power and who has the authority to make the decisions about the content and the programming allowed in public libraries is important. And I know that as faculty, we do a lot of service to our community and for our students in the university, but I encourage everyone also to engage in your city, county, school, and library boards because we have the expertise and the authority to help make more informed decisions in local government. I also encourage you to be a library consumer, even if it's your campus library. Those numbers and those materials being used justify that the issues are important, the content is important. And while some of us are in the privileged position to be able to acquire those materials on our own, we need to encourage libraries across the board to acquire the materials that we normally engage with so that they're available for others. And do at your institution for your community what your public libraries cannot. We have the benefit of academic freedom to varying degrees across the CSU, and we have a responsibility to try to extend that as much as possible into the greater community. And I will turn it back over to Catherine.
Thank you so much. I love these calls to action. We're going to talk about more of that in the Q&A, I'm sure. But without further ado, I want to get to our next speaker. Lisa Cheby, are you ready? Lisa, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I thought I must have clicked it twice. Sorry about that. I thank you so much, Catherine and Rain, Amanda, and Melissa for putting this panel together. So my name is Lisa Cheby, and I am the education librarian at California State University, Northridge. I am a white woman of middle age, white woman with brown hair, brown eyes, and black glasses, and I'm wearing a black shirt today. I'm a former high school teacher librarian and current vice president of government relations for the California School Library Association. So I'm going to be talking about the crisis of book banning as part of the larger crisis of literacy and school libraries in California. And here you have my contact information. And there will be a QR code at the end of the slide, but I can also put a link at the chat when I'm done here if you want access to the slide. So once again, this slide that was just updated thanks to an email that Ray sent out today. I was aware of that. So I added in a little caption here. But this was looking at the titles challenge between August 1st and 31st of 2023. So originally, when I made this slide, it was 38 attempts to restrict books in California, and 78 titles were challenged. Today, it's with the update, that's the second square there, 52 and 98 titles challenged. So this is, again, is from the Office of Intellectual Freedom and United Against Book Bans through ALA. But really, there's not a great way of tracking books that are challenged, or within school libraries in particular, separating school libraries from public libraries. And from what I've learned in my position in government relations, discussions I've had with school librarians, and emails that we have received, I would say this is probably somewhat of an undercount of what's happening in schools. So what does censorship look like in California schools? We've already talked about, which books are most commonly being banned, and different organizations, and that holds true for school libraries. It can be quiet or organized at protests at school board meetings, at schools, sometimes from inside the school and community, sometimes from out. One group, Awaken in Redlands, is kind of like a Moms for Liberty type of group. You can see they have an Instagram page. They're very organized. And here's a post calling for people to support challenges to these particular titles. Often, again, as Amanda was saying, it's about content and targeting specific communities and identities. Another instance, so these again are all examples of from emails I've received and conversations I've had with teacher librarians through California School Library Association. Parents obtain lists from other school districts, such as Texas, and use them to file reconsideration orders. And sometimes it does result in removing books, not only from a school where maybe the parent has a child, but from other schools within the district. Sometimes it's also just concerned parents or teachers who might have a genuine concern about something like hate speech. So at a school near me, there was a challenge against Joe Sacco's Palestine for anti-Semitic panels in the book. It was reviewed. They did have a clear process at that school. It was reviewed and kept in the library. The other thing is, when there are procedures are in place and followed, many of the book reviews for these challenges do result in keeping the books, which is something to be hopeful about. So California schools, the other part of the crisis that I want to talk about, it now has our attention because we have these book bans, and everybody, it's in the forefront of everybody's mind, or the public's mind, drawing attention to literacy and intellectual freedom. But there's a bigger crisis behind that, and that's the equity that started about 2 decades ago when California cut funding for school libraries, including our school librarians. So California is 50th out of 50 states and DC in students per teacher librarian ratio. So you can see the chart here. Both the two excerpts of the charts are from the SLIDE study, which is a nationwide study of staffing of school libraries conducted by Keith Curry-Lance and Deborah Kochel. And so you can see in 2021-22, there were, for every teacher librarian, for every 9,964 students, there was one teacher librarian. To put that in some perspective, the California Model School Library Standards says, and this is adopted by the California Department of Education, their own standards, that should be one credentialed full-time librarian for every 785 students. And in the chart below, you can see it's a little bit small, but 500 students per librarian is the standard according to the American Association of School Librarians, which is a division of the American Library Association. Another way to look at it, as faculty members at California State Northridge, we have 26 librarians for 40,000 students. So you can see what we have in our public schools is really understaffing of school librarians. And this is essential because, like all librarians, school librarians are uniquely trained to uphold the American Library Association Bill of Rights, which states that we provide access to books, materials, and information, include all point of views in that information materials that we provide. We challenge censorship, collaborate with others to resist threats to intellectual freedom, create welcoming spaces that are accessible for all, and protect the privacy of our patrons, which obviously in school libraries are our students in California. So what happens when books are challenged in a state with little support for school library? As you can imagine, there is a void in leadership for preparing schools and enabling them to be able to meet these challenges and protect intellectual freedom. There's not a clear process often in many schools for either the collection development or addressing the challenges, because that would be the purview and expertise of the teacher librarian. District and local administrators often lack the knowledge of how to create a collection development policy, and they often are aware of what they're missing in the expertise of a teacher librarian, a credentialed teacher librarian. So many administrators, their first reaction is to quiet the opponents and take the books off the shelves. That is often a knee-jerk reaction because they don't know how to deal with these, because there's no clear policy. There's no dedicated personnel to deal with this. For libraries, many libraries are open in our schools, but they only staff classified personnel, so not certificated teacher librarians. And as dedicated as they are, and I'm sure many of them, are fighting in many ways against these book bans, they're not trained to lead in these issues, to develop collection development policies. And when they are asked to do so, that is actually another sort of injustice of labor, where somebody's being asked to do something beyond their job duties. So it's a real problem in school libraries and for personnel, and many of them are under threat. The threat of violence, unwanted social media attention, and even the loss of their livelihood. So soft censorship or self-censorship often becomes an issue in schools. So that's when schools or librarians just choose to not include certain materials in book orders because they fear it might be controversial. So what's being done in California, what's different about California than maybe Texas or Florida, is that we do have a legislature and a governor who supports intellectual freedom. So AB 1078 was just passed this in the last legislative cycle. And that was a reaction to Temecula, which Amanda mentioned, when the school board voted to ban elementary social studies curriculum that included information about Harvey Milk and called Milk a pedophile. So that really prompted Governor Newsom to push this bill through and get it approved and sign it. And that's great, but it's really sort of a philosophical move more than a practical move. So this prohibits school districts from refusing adoption of materials that have been approved by the California Department of Education because it includes a study of the role or contributions of any individual group as specified, and that as specified elsewhere in the bill talks about many of the identities and groups that are targeted that Amanda already talked about in her presentation. The goal is by July 2025 that there's a process for complaint for this, but right now nothing still exists, and July 2025 seems a far goal date if you're in a school where people are pulling books off the shelf. So AB 1078 is it's a great, and I really do value that we are in a state where the legislature recognizes this is an issue and is doing something to stand up against it. Really needs something that goes beyond that, and it doesn't address the issue that we don't have teachers challenges. Moreover, what if you are in a school? So here I have two quotes from Office of Education. Their superintendents are not supportive. In fact, they are using the fact that they have the one teacher librarian in their district as an excuse or as a make unilateral decisions that are censoring libraries and books. And you can see the second quote, they refuse to order books the librarians want and have professionally vetted. There's no formal which is common. It's hard to speak up and know that your job is on the line. So they're really in quite a predicament. So what do you do if the person who you're supposed to be reporting these issues to is putting together a toolkit to help prevent and prepare districts and schools and school personnel to deal with challenges through
Lisa, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're getting a bit of a lag on your feed, and we're missing some of the dialogue, and I'm wondering if maybe you can try turning off your camera, if that will help with the connection so we can hear you, because I feel like we're missing key bits of info. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, please, thank you. Because with the slides, it's hard to see this.
Yeah, it seems like
So I didn't realize. Yeah, let me turn off.
Ooh, it's still happening.
Did that help?
Keep trying, and hopefully it'll work now.
Should I, sorry, should I, maybe it's sharing the screen. Is it better when I'm not sharing my screen?
It is smooth now.
Okay, well,
I spoke too soon.
Without the slide, sorry about that. So the book challenge, let me grab this link and I'm gonna. I wanted to create this book challenge toolkit. California School Library Association and the California State Library. And so the goal in creating
Yeah, Lisa, you're frozen now.
that. So we have some libraries who had already and I see.
Yeah, Lisa, you're still frozen, unfortunately.
Let me turn off my, I know I just saw that the okay. Can you hear me with my camera off?
Yeah, that's better for now, hopefully. Okay, yeah, and it looks like Melissa said we're also at time, Lisa.
Yeah.
So I hope during the Q&A we'll get to address some of the points that we missed, because your slides had a lot, and your talk had so much wonderful information specific to California that I want to dig into. So hopefully, maybe if you keep your screen off during the Q&A portion, we can do that. But without further ado, last and certainly not least, we have Ginny Barnes, and then we'll get to our Q&A.
I'm just navigating all these screens. Hi, everyone. My name's Ginny Barnes. I use they, them, she, her pronouns, and I'm a 30-something light-skinned person with gold wire frame glasses and dark hair. I'm wearing a red sweater today. And I am going to share a little bit. We got a lot of information from the other panelists. Thank you, everyone, for putting those together. And a lot of information kind of like on a large scale and where we're at right now. And I want to focus in on things that have been going on in Fresno County in particular, and some efforts that we've done around this in Fresno State. So a little bit more about myself. I'm the first year student success librarian at CSU Fresno, and I'm also the president of our Fresno State LGBTQ+ allies faculty and staff network. So I'm kind of thinking about just books in general and why we love them. That's kind of the theme of my presentation. I want to share this kind of little case study. It's a story of bigotry and creative resistance in Fresno. And there's a timeline I'll share, but this image that I have here is a Facebook post from a Clovis City Council member, Diane Pierce, and this is from June 2023. There's a picture she posted from Clovis County Library, where Fresno County Library in Clovis. They have a pride display of children's books about queerness. There's another picture of a book on the page. It says, when Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's gender identity. And Diane Pierce writes, might want to wait until June is over to take your kids to the Clovis Public Library. FYI, the Clovis City Council has no direct control over this, ... These are Fresno County libraries. So this council member in particular has been kind of stirring up book banning in the area. And to give you kind of a broader timeline of events, because this is happening. I call it a don't say gay Fresno timeline, because I've noticed that it's a very intentional strategy not to say all of the things that we've mentioned. These are rooted in race and ethnicity, gayness, queer community. They don't say that in talking about this, they reframe it. So to give you some kind of background information, in May of 2023, our Fresno County Board of Supervisors passed a flag ordinance, which stipulated that only the US and California states flag may be flown on county property and county facilities. So this meant we don't have a pride flag raising ceremony just in time for June. At the end of June, our Fresno State campus had our pride flag vandalized. And then kind of, as you saw the tweet from Councilmember Pierce, she was kind of stirring up trouble around the pride displays in the county library, possibly linking having a pride display in a county library is connected to this ordinance. And in August and September, the Clovis City Council member, Diane Pierce, kind of took a formal issue with the Clovis County pride display and made a failed proposal for them to write a joint letter to the Board of Supervisors. The county, this Clovis City Council doesn't have any jurisdiction over the Fresno County libraries, and community showed up in support of our books and our access, and that proposal failed, but the momentum was still growing among conservative supervisors. And so in November, Supervisor Steve Brandow proposed a resolution for a committee to review children's books in Fresno County libraries. Again, we had a lot of community come out in support of our access to books and in support of our LGBTQ+ communities. And yet the Parents Matter Act, which is what it's called, passed 3-2 despite the strong opposition from the public. And kind of to some things that have happened since then. We've had our elections. That supervisor was up for election and will go on into a runoff, but both options aren't really great. And where they're at now with the Parents Matter Act is that I think in the next Board of Supervisor meeting, they're going to be voting on approving the bylaws for that committee and the process for getting people to serve on the committee. So just a little bit more about what the Parents Matter Act is. It's an 11-person committee in Fresno County consisting of residents. 2 members are appointed by each supervisor and 1 by the county administrative office. Called the Parents Matter Act, but they don't have to be a parent. They are reviewing all the books in the children's section from all Fresno County library branches, as well as new acquisitions. They're broadly targeting anything that has to do with like sexual topics. Very offensive, the way they describe it, I've highlighted in the resolution image. Anything viewed by the community as obscene. And then they amended the resolution to include that there's a posted list of the censored books and that there's an appeal process. And again, the community in Fresno in the Central Valley showed up to speak out against this. The image on the left is from one of the Clovis City Council meetings, and there's a woman holding a sign over her head with a shirt that says "Protect Trans Kids." The image up top is from one of the Board of Supervisors meetings, and there's a long line of people speaking out against this resolution. I have some logos from PFLAG Fresno and Reforma. Both of those community orgs and other community orgs were all coming together to speak out against this, but unfortunately the act still passed, and it's the reality that we're living in. And as this was all happening, you know, it's not very surprising, unfortunately, but it still felt like, personally, it felt unreal, and it's demoralizing. You feel angry, you feel, depressed, and it's just really upsetting when people come out and they speak, but the people in power don't listen. And so what do we do? What do we do after that? So transitioning to kind of talking about what we've done at Fresno State Library, I was really interested in kind of reclaiming our joy and all of the wonderful, beautiful, life-saving things that we get from books and from reading. This image is a little piece of art I created to promote this event we called Love Letter to Banned Books. I wanted to do something for Banned Books Week. This was in October of 2023. And so I reached out to my community. And this includes Benita Blackburn, who is an associate professor of creative writing at Fresno State and author of Dead in Long Beach, California, just shouting out her book. She's also my really good friend. And Mercedes Espino, who is my graduate student assistant at the library and also a candidate in the MFA writing program. And who better to go to than writers to come up with some kind of event, an activity that can get us to think about and talk about banned books and book banning in like a different way. And so kind of what we came up with was we came up with a creative writing workshop with the theme of banned books. And we had different opportunities for students to participate. We had whiteboards with kind of open-ended questions that they could fill in the answer, post-it notes that they could respond to. All of this was around the theme of loving books. And so one of the questions we posed was, what was the first book you fell in love with? To kind of lean into like all of that, all of the good things that we get out of books and reading. We brought a creative reuse cart, which is all of the materials a lot of materials that we discard from the library and want to reuse, and we repurpose it for collage, origami, and students made art based on this question: what was the first book you fell in love with? And we gathered all the art and put it into a zine, which I'll show you a little bit more of later. We also had an activity to write a love letter to banned books. We had a big piece of paper and kind of collectively wrote a love letter to banned books. We used this creative writing exercise called Exquisite Corpse. So one person writes 3 lines you cover up the last 2 lines and the next person kind of continues it. And that's how we wrote our joint letter together. We also got teamed up with our ACLU Northern California and Fresno County chapter to sponsor a banned book giveaway at the event as kind of an incentive for people to come. I just wanted to show you a little bit of one of the whiteboards. So the question on the left is, what was the first book you fell in love with? And then there's some sticky notes with what people filled in. And then the next question was, or was kind of fill in the blank. It's not banning books, it's banning blank. And some of the students wrote culture, growth, power, voice, love, learning, humanity. We really, I think banning books is just a proxy for all those other things that people are in power or afraid of. And one thing that was nice about this event was that it was just a one-time event, but we also kind of extended the opportunity for participation by moving the whiteboard into kind of a public area in the library so that students passing by could also engage. And this was what the whiteboard looked like at the end of the week. So we got a lot of engagement. And then it was really nice as well that all of that art that the students created during that event, we were able to put into a zine. And these are some of the examples of the art that they created. On the left, there's a picture of kind of where we started with the love letter to banned books. The image in the middle is one of the pieces that a student created. On the top, it says a defense of the fairy tale. And then on the right, there's an image of an anchor. It's a collage kind of anchor with a balloon hanging from it, and it says house on Mango Street. So I just think that I wanted students to engage with this topic without feeling the weight of all of the disappointment and the anger. Like I wanted to embrace them and us to embrace joy more, because this is hard work. And for our own kind of self-preservation, I think it's nice to reacquaint ourselves with books and why we love them so much. And maybe that's an interesting or different way to kind of pivot the conversation. And so I wanted to share that with you as well. Opportunity to share what was the first book you fell in love with. And you can text that number or go to the QR code if you want to share an answer. But I'll leave it up for a little bit, or maybe you can put it in the chat. Maybe we can see those.
Yeah, we can put some of them in the chat. Ginny, we're at time and I want to make sure that we have enough for discussion and to answer people's questions. But I'm so glad we ended with yours and ended on sort of that joyful feeling in the face of so much negativity. So now I would like to open it up. If anyone has a question, please put it in the Q&A and I will read it aloud. But to get us started, also, Ginny, I'm stealing that idea. It's very similar to what I planned for Banned Books Week in October, and I'm going to email you offline so we can collaborate on this coming October, because I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But I wanted to go back to something that Ray and Lisa touched on, is the self or soft censorship in education. And if you might be able to give, the attendees here are other faculty who may not be librarians, and how can they help fight against book bans and fight against that self-censorship and soft censorship? And Lisa or Ray, whoever wants to take it first.
Yeah, maybe I'll start off first and then I'll pass it over to Lisa. So it really is an interesting way to think of book banning as something that's explicit, right? Something that people tend to think it's taken off shelf, but there are actually other strategies that we've been seeing that has also been really quite disruptive. So if you're setting up book exhibits or book displays, people tend to check them out, right? Or not return the book. And that was a strategy that I've been hearing more and more across this country that people are doing who are against these types of content and for whatever reason, right? And then it's like, a strategy that they have been doing that, as well as sort of thinking about your policy, looking into that, right? Because every collection development process has a policy in place, and a lot of them are not updated. So that requires us to look into it and look at what it means to weed something. So in academic libraries, we tend to weed a lot, or we tend to collect many materials for research, but weeding is often pretty common in public and school to save space for budget reasons and for updated and reflective of the curriculum, as opposed to something that's like looking at things historically. So there's a lot of removal of book displays. And I wanted to share, this happened, actually, I was a librarian at Fresno State several years ago, and we had tried to do an exhibit, I remember, a book display to reflect the Executive Order 9066 to remember what happened. And there was an exhibit there from the Special Collections Research Center, and we wanted to do a little book display to reflect that, because it's really important to remember that Japanese and Japanese Americans were incarcerated, signed by this executive order. And so we had books about it. And so a colleague came up to me and said, "Why are you showing these books in the first floor of this library? Because you're making people feel ashamed, and this is not something we want to tell." And then it really threw me off, because I thought, everyone should be, it's just a book display, right? Everyone should be engaged. But I had to have this long conversation with this person, and they actually removed a couple of the books and said, "Why can't we tell stories about people falling in love in these camps?" And I was like, I don't think that's the point of this exhibit nor this book display, but I see what you're getting at. And we've had to have this really intense conversation. This was a colleague, right? So I see these types of experiences that are happening, not necessarily just from the general public, but also other people that we might work with. So I also see a removal of content from curriculum, this sort of because of the fear, and then removing a database access because of certain content that's happening with a lot of our ebook providers are being caught in the situation, right? And so there's a lot of this tension here that I'm noticing. I just wanted to name out that example, some other things I'm seeing, and maybe Lisa, you might have some other points.
Yeah, I think when I think of self-censorship, or soft censorship as it's called, is I think it's even a little bit more insidious in that collection development process. So perhaps as a librarian, if I know that, I know what these titles are, I mean, maybe locally or at another school or nearby in the next district, if there were books that were challenged, maybe I would, do something like, well, I'm not going to add that one to my book order this year, which doesn't seem like a big deal. It's one book, but if that's the reason that you're not selecting material, allowing it into your library, and even more problematic again when you have, in California, we have many schools without a teacher librarian. So what happens is they will contract with maybe a county library, or maybe they have one librarian in the district who might create a list, and that's the approved list. And then the staff in the library can select from that list which books they would want to order. And so that staff might purposefully choose not to order books that might be controversial. So that's what I think of when I think of soft censorship or self-censorship. And as you can see, it's really allowing the challengers to win, because they don't even have to do the work of challenging the books anymore, where it's just they've created such an atmosphere of hostility and fear that people don't even want to risk adding new books or diverse books or books that might offend somebody in the community.
Thank you. And Amanda, you said you had a couple examples to share with us as well.
Yes, to Lisa's point about collection development practices, for the book Genderqueer, there's the San Joaquin Valley Library System stems from Kern County up to, I think, Mariposa County. And the only, I think, 4 library systems in all of that have book Genderqueer are Fresno County, Tulare County, Kings County, and Madera County. Kern County does not own that book. 500,000 people live in this county, and they don't have access to that book unless they order it from Fresno. The other thing is, as a public librarian, when I worked in that area, you get parents that would say, hey, I don't want these books accessible to my child. We had a section of middle grade books that weren't quite young adult, weren't quite K through 6. And so we labeled them and shelved them separately, which is soft censorship. You're removing those so that when children or adults look at those titles, they are being targeted or called out. And then the other two things I wanted to mention real quick, besides just not buying things, being careful about what displays you put on the internet. We did a banned books display, and I told the librarian who did it, please do not create a LibGuide or a web page of those titles, because you are handing somebody a list of titles to come in and pull out of the collection. What we did at CSU Bakersfield is our collection development policy dictates you have to have the book in your hand to place a challenge request with our dean. If you cannot put your hands on that book, you cannot challenge it. That way they can't do it online. They can't do mass requests to challenge. And if they don't attend the university, they can't challenge those books. So there's different ways to fight the soft censorship and the self-censorship, but it is a really big deal in our profession.
So much for sharing. Melissa asks, what could racial and social justice unions like CFA do? And how are higher ed academic libraries affected by the challenges and banning in public and school libraries? And maybe Ginny, if you feel like starting, so we didn't hear from you yet in the Q&A.
Sure. So I think the first part of that question, what could we do specifically an organization like CFA? Your librarians at your CSU campuses are desperate to collaborate with you. And we want to, I think research is, especially because that's what we focus on, is I'm kind of in my own research and just teaching, I'm zeroing in on research and just like approaching research like we naturally have curiosity, because I think curiosity and creativity can really be like a balm to ideological polarization. I think there can be buzzwords and just kind of this like reactivity to a certain idea that we haven't even really spent time thinking about. And if we can create assignments, like really interesting, innovative, like, things that spark students' interest, I think they can learn how to develop these like self-reflective skills, analytical skills that, will show our students that they don't have to think one way or the other. We really want them to develop that critical thinking. So I hope that answered one part of that question. I don't know if someone else wants to chime in.
I love that. We're definitely going to have to talk as the outreach librarian. Absolutely, partnership with other faculty. For anybody who was at CI last October, I partnered with some faculty in the Chicano Studies department, and then we convened a panel with folks from our early childhood studies, education, Black studies, all together to talk about how book banning and censorship affects each other, and did some really great programming on that. And I love the love letter to ban books and so many other opportunities for that. Any of our other panelists want to continue on that thought, Lisa?
Yeah, I wanted to, I didn't, since I have the technical difficulties, I think something that's really important is for all unions, I would encourage CFA to work with local teacher unions to find out what is the situation in your area with school libraries and school librarians. So hopefully what didn't get lost in the technical difficulties is the great lack of teacher librarians who would be the leaders in meeting these book challenges on campus and preparing campuses so that they to discourage book challenges and censorship, because they have clear policies and can intervene before it comes a book challenge. And just knowing, you know, if you have children, you know, who is the person in the library that's running the library, and how can you support them? If you are, you know, social justice minded, which I imagine you are at this conference, then you know, just talk to them and find out if there are challenges there and how you can support that, and use the information that we have in the CSUs and help bring that to your local schools and teachers and librarians there.
Thank you so much. Do either of our other panelists want to respond to that question?
I will real quick.
Yeah.
One of my subject liaisonships is to the English department, and I work with their undergrad and graduate programs. And what I'm finding is we're starting to get students who don't have knowledge of canonical works. And so to a lesser extent, I mentioned The Grapes of Wrath to a group of first-time college students 2 weeks ago. And I don't know if it was because they were tired and asleep for visiting the library, or if it was because they actually hadn't read it, but nobody was familiar with The Grapes of Wrath, which is a previously frequently challenged title. But I can imagine if they don't know The Grapes of Wrath, they're not going to know Beloved, or Their Eyes Were Watching God, or The Color Purple, or Genderqueer, or any of the titles that are on the banned books list. And so I think that's where it hits us the hardest, is we are used to teaching to a common set of values and knowledge, and that knowledge is being eroded.
Thank you. Ray, it looked like you had a response.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say exactly what Amanda was saying about this gap of knowledge that we're seeing students coming in uninformed or not as prepared. And this is exactly a similar parallel issue with the attrition of school libraries and librarians in the state of California, and how there is a correlation of increasing more academic librarians focused on first year experience, like the work Ginny is doing and something I had done before, because there is that missing piece of critical information literacy skills and research skills that's not developed in the high school, and now it's sort of coming in at college, and it's coming in later. And this is the same notion with thinking about these books that people might not know and have read of. So that also means, what are the implications? So maybe skills like empathy, experiences of having these deep connections and understanding, feeling affirmed. And so all of that also comes into play as they're going to college. And what does that mean? I think reading controversial books can be really challenging, and it's part of the growing pains of learning, right? But if you don't have that exposure at that point when you're moving through in high school, and then now you're learning in college, it's going to be not as sort of part of that growth that we're seeing previously. So that's what I wanted to add. And also in terms of what racial and social justice unions like CFA can do, I certainly believe in coalition building, like Ginny was saying. Just really come together, support your libraries, as well as your public and schools. Consider thinking about serving in running for school boards and things like that, and then really coming with that mindset, right? That we're here to ensure there's social inclusion in the curriculum and the work we're doing, and writing those letters to editors, and being a private citizen, even if you might not be able to speak, right? As that individual connected to this university or institution. You can always do that as a private citizen.
Thank you so much. I wanted to go back to the idea of joy as resistance and what Ginny was talking about. And I'm wondering if you all might share, and feel free to popcorn around, of if there's anything that gives you hope for the future. Every year that the numbers come out, I am so disheartened. And there was a Washington Post analysis last year that found that 60% of all the challenges in 2021, 2022 came from 11 adults, most of them who were sharing those lists that Amanda was talking about. So it's really hard. I'm that duck in your panels, right? That's like, there's so much, what do we do? So if there's anything that sparks joy for you or hope for the future, that we can, with all of the action items that you gave us, that we can fight against it and start to see that censorship dip again. And anyone who wants to go.
I will jump in. The things that bring me joy and bring me hope are my students, because there are a lot of students I see over and over again in modern languages and English and education and comm. And I just started working with the ethnic studies department here. And the students that come back again and again who are engaged and focused and working towards that purpose give me a lot of hope. But also I'm in that doctoral program. And so I am working with people at the superintendent's office and principals and curriculum coordinators and AVPs and VPs from other CSUs. And so having the dialogue about these kinds of issues with them and them realizing the light going on, hey, this is a problem, hey, I can help, has really given me hope as well. Like when this is done and recorded, I'm sending this to everyone in my cohort to educate them as well. So I hope this is helpful for faculty outside of the library, that it's not just a library problem. We can all work together to fix it.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to share?
I would say, even though the laws aren't always well written, the fact that the legislature has been addressing this, at least in California, gives me hope that, you know, they're concerned, that they realize it's a problem. And also, as I shared before, the fact that when there is a clear process and books are, you know, challenged and then reviewed by board, usually the books are kept. The challenges don't win. And so that gives me hope, because we do have a process and there is the possibility. It's just tiring for the people on the front lines. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say something real quick. For me, it's about the process of coming together right now with all of you, all this amazing panel, and all of you, about 60-ish people in the call and those watching. It really affirms that the work we're doing is one that requires a collective, a community, and that we are raising issues, raising awareness, but also taking action. And so I, last Thursday, had a chance to go to a California Library Association event to celebrate the State Senate pro temporal emeritus Tony Atkins, who has been a champion supporting libraries and California Library Association, getting the Dolly Parton's Imagination Library and a bunch of funds over the years. And then in her speech in San Diego Public Library, she acknowledged this fight that requires everyone, this fight for freedom to read, that free people read freely. And I felt affirmed just seeing a leader, right, talking about this, and that we're not alone. And just know that we're, you know, everyone's experiencing this in different ways, but we're certainly in this together.
I'll just add really quick. Also, the students are great. And sometimes too, like they're not even just their desire to learn and to know more. I've noticed this, the younger students I work with, the first years, one of them was saying, I want to read more. They like struggle with, you know, the attention span thing and just all the media influx that they're getting, but some of that influence is good because they see other young people talking about books and how this is important and what they get out of it. And so that there's that desire to learn and to speak up, and that's inspiring.
Thank you so much. I agree. The students have been great, and Dr. Cerna in our Chicano Studies has a pop-up book, which is fun and joyful. It's like you try to censor information, but it still pops up, and it's an allegory, and it's charming, and absolutely love it. I'd be happy to connect you all with him and share that work. It's very fun, but I agree with the that the students bring me joy as well in their participation. We are close to getting to time. We have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to work to transition us out, but I want to give our panelists one more opportunity if they have any last thing that they want to share. Myself personally, if anybody watching wants to partner with the CI Outreach Librarian on something dealing with banned books, please email me. I would be more than happy to partner, and that goes for the panelists too, anything that you might want to work on. But please feel free to share anything that you might have as a closing note. And if not, I can transfer us to the next session as well. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. If we were in person, I would ask everyone to give our panelists a huge round of applause, but you can just hold that in your heart internally since we can't see you. I'm so grateful for all of you participating and for sharing your slides and your knowledge and expertise with us. Oh, excuse me. There's still more programming today and tomorrow. There's 2 concurrent sessions happening at 5 p.m. Reclaiming the Radical Politics of Self-Care, A Crip of Color Critique, and Capitalist State Violence. So hopefully you registered for those, and the links will be in your email from CFA. Laura, please step in if there's anything that I'm missing to wrap up our panel today. But thank you everyone who presented, and our interpreters, the CFA conference presenters. It's a heavy lift to get this done.